Elon Musk had faced tough crowds before, but nothing like this. Imagine it. You're sitting in a packed courtroom, hands gripping a polished oak table, your heart pounding like a drum against your ribs. The room is dead silent, the air so thick with tension you could cut it with a knife. Cameras flash like lightning, and reporters are scribbling notes with a frantic energy. This isn't just another tech headline. This is personal, this is public, and it's about to become unforgettable. Then a voice slices through the silence. "Mr. Musk," says Judge Veronica Hayes, her tone calm but sharp as a razor. "I've seen billionaires stumble before, but watching you stumble is, frankly, entertaining." The courtroom just explodes. You hear muffled laughs, shocked gasps. And Elon? His jaw literally drops. Not because he isn't used to criticism, he practically lives on it, but because this is different. This isn't just a troll on Twitter. Judge Veronica Hayes isn't just any judge. She's the most respected, sharpest, and most uncompromising jurist in California. Her words aren't just a ruling. They're a masterclass in public roasting. Imagine being in his shoes for a second. What if you suddenly had to face the most powerful person in the room, and everything you'd ever built felt like it could crumble in an instant? Elon just stares at her, caught somewhere between total disbelief and raw fury. This story might just be the start of something new. Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And I have a question for you. What is that one thing that always pushes you forward, even when everything seems to be falling apart? For Elon, in that courtroom, his mind didn't stay on the judge. It raced back thousands of miles and decades into the past, to his childhood in Pretoria, South Africa. He was a boy obsessed with rockets, electric cars, and lines of computer code. While other kids were outside playing, he was inside, spending his nights coding video games. His father, Errol, was a tough man with a sharp tongue, whose criticism could cut deep. On the other side was his mother, May, a model and dietitian, who offered warmth and encouragement. But her influence could only stretch so far against the constant weight of his father's judgment. It was there, in that environment, that a young Elon learned a fundamental lesson. The world is an unforgiving place, and being brilliant doesn't guarantee you kindness. That tough lesson forged a resilience that would define the rest of his life. Back in the courtroom, Judge Hayes wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "You talk about colonizing Mars, Mr. Musk. An admirable goal, perhaps, but it seems you've forgotten how to navigate the terrain of basic human decency right here on Earth." The words hung in the air, each one a perfectly aimed dart. The reporters scribbled even faster. This wasn't just a legal proceeding anymore, it was a spectacle. Elon felt a surge of defiance. He wanted to retort, to defend his vision, to explain the complexities of his work. But he held his tongue. He remembered his father's dismissive tone, the way his ambitious ideas were often shot down before they could even take flight. He had learned to channel that frustration, not into angry outbursts, but into an almost obsessive drive to prove everyone wrong. This courtroom, this judge, it was just another obstacle, another no. And Elon's entire life had been a series of turning no's into rocket launches. He looked at the judge, and for the first time the anger was replaced by a flicker of something else, a strange sort of recognition. She was a force of nature, just like him, but in a different domain. He thought about his first major venture, Zip2. He and his brother Kimball started it in a tiny rented office with barely enough money for rent. They showered at the local YMCA and slept on the office floor. People told them the internet was a fad, that newspapers would never pay for online directories. They called him crazy. But Elon just kept coding, kept pitching, kept pushing. That relentless belief, born from a childhood where he had to believe in himself because few others did, is what turned Zip2 into a success that he sold for over $300 million. That sale wasn't the end. It was the beginning. He poured his fortune into his next idea, an online financial services company called XCOM. The risks were enormous. Online banking was a new and terrifying concept for most people. His own team had doubts. There were technical glitches, security concerns, and fierce competition from a company called Confinity. which had its own payment system called PayPal. Instead of fighting them to the death, they did the unexpected. They merged. The merger was chaotic. There were huge egos, massive disagreements about the company's direction. At one point, while Elon was on a long overdue vacation, the board staged a coup and ousted him as CEO. It was a brutal betrayal. He could have walked away, embittered and rich, but he didn't. He believed in the mission. He remained the largest shareholder and a key advisor, because he knew that peer-to-peer payments were the future. And when eBay bought PayPal for $1.5 billion, his share was a staggering $180 million. Now, sitting in that courtroom, listening to Judge Hayes dissect his character, Elon wasn't just hearing a judge. He was hearing echoes of all the doubters from his past. The kids who bullied him, his father's harsh words, the investors who said no, the board that fired him. Each one had been a test. Each one had fueled his resolve. He took a slow, deep breath. The camera flashes seemed to slow down. The scribbling of the reporters faded into a low hum. He had built SpaceX when people said private spaceflight was a fantasy. He had poured everything into Tesla when the electric car industry was a joke and the company was weeks from bankruptcy. He had faced down Wall Street short sellers, production nightmares, and launch failures. Every time he had been on the brink. Every time he had found a way forward. Judge Hayes was still speaking, but Elon was no longer just listening to her words. He was looking at the bigger picture. This moment, this public humiliation, was just another data point in a lifetime of them. It was another problem to be solved. He thought about the engineering challenges of landing a rocket booster on a tiny drone ship in the middle of the ocean. Compared to that, a tough judge was just a different kind of physics problem. He finally looked up, meeting her gaze. The fury was gone. The disbelief was gone. In their place was a calm, focused intensity, the kind of look he got right before a critical rocket launch. He knew this moment wasn't an ending. It was just another ignition sequence. The world was watching, waiting for him to stumble, waiting for him to fall. But Elon Musk had learned a long time ago that falling wasn't the problem. The problem was staying down, and he had no intention of doing that. So, as we wrap up this chapter of his incredible journey, remember that the biggest challenges we face often forge the very strengths we need to succeed. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button for more stories that dig deeper. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Decades had passed, and now, he found himself in a courtroom facing a trial of a different kind. One where his brilliance alone wouldn't be enough to save him. Across from him sat Veronica Hayes, her presence as sharp and defined as the crisp black robes she wore. She seemed to embody every single challenge he had ever faced in his life. Her upbringing, just like his, had been intense, though wildly different in its style. Veronica had grown up in a tough working-class neighborhood in Chicago. Resilience wasn't a choice for her, it was a necessity, learned early on as she navigated the male-dominated world of the legal system. She wasn't cruel. No, she was far more dangerous than that. She was precise, utterly fearless, and unapologetically direct. The roast, as it was now being called, was in full swing. "Tesla's stock may soar, Mr. Musk," she said, leaning forward just slightly, her eyes locking onto his. "But your humility is clearly still in beta testing." A wave of laughter, sharp and sudden, rippled through the room. Out of the corner of his eye, Elon saw his publicist physically wince. The press cameras zoomed in, hungry for a reaction, capturing every flicker of emotion on his face. The initial shock, the creeping embarrassment, and then something deeper, a flicker of realization. This wasn't just courtroom drama playing out for the cameras. This was a mirror, a brutally honest one, held up directly to his ego. It reflected vulnerabilities he usually kept buried behind a fortress of rockets, controversial tweets, and world-changing headlines. As the hearing wore on, the stakes became painfully clear. It wasn't just one decision on the line, it was everything. His companies, his reputation, even the meticulously crafted public persona he had built over the years. All of it was on trial. He tried to respond, to formulate a defense, but every argument Veronica delivered was like a perfectly aimed dart, precise, pointed, and merciless. His mind flashed back to the first time he had faced true professional criticism, years and years ago at SpaceX. He remembered the engineers, brilliant in their own right, doubting the feasibility of his audacious plans. He remembered the investors, their faces etched with concern, questioning his sanity. But that criticism, that doubt, had forged him. It had shaped him, forcing him to innovate under unimaginable pressure. But this was different. This wasn't about the physics of rocketry or the cold logic of profit margins. This was personal, and it cut deeper than any technical failure ever could. Outside the courtroom, a media frenzy was erupting. Social media had exploded. Memes, hot takes, and viral clips of Veronica's verbal takedowns were spreading like wildfire. Within hours, Elon Musk was trending worldwide, and not for a successful rocket launch. It was humiliating, a public undressing of his psyche. But as the initial sting of embarrassment began to fade, something inside him started to shift. He saw the patterns, the recurring moments where his own arrogance had been a blindfold, the missteps in communication, the dangerous overconfidence in his own decision-making, the times he had brushed aside advice from people who genuinely cared about him and his vision. The courtroom roast wasn't just entertainment for the masses. For him, it was a revelation. His train of thought, a chaotic jumble of past mistakes and present realities, was suddenly interrupted by a voice, "Mr. Musk." Veronica's tone was even, patient. "The court is waiting for your response." He looked up, blinking, the roar of the internet fading into the background, replaced by the heavy silence of the courtroom. For the first time in a long time, he felt a profound uncertainty. What could he possibly say? He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was the man who promised to colonize Mars, to revolutionize transportation, to connect the world with satellites. Yet in this room, under the unwavering gaze of one woman, he was speechless. The silence stretched, becoming more uncomfortable with each passing second. The cameras were still on him, recording this uncharacteristic hesitation for the world to see. Veronica didn't press him. She simply waited, an eyebrow slightly raised, giving him the space to either dig his own grave or find a new way to climb out. He took a slow, deliberate breath. The reflection in the mirror was unflattering, yes, but it was also true. Acknowledging that truth felt like the first step. "You're right," he began, his voice quiet but clear, surprising everyone in the room, most of all himself. The admission hung in the air. Laughter died down, whispers ceased. Everyone leaned in, sensing a shift in the drama. "My humility, it has been in beta for far too long. Perhaps," he continued, a faint, self-deprecating smile touching his lips, "it's time for a software update." The tension in the room broke, replaced by a murmur of surprise and, from some corners, respect. Veronica Hayes' expression remained unreadable, but for a split second he thought he saw a flicker of something other than professional detachment in her eyes. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. The legal challenges remained, the public scrutiny wouldn't just disappear. But in that moment of vulnerability, Elon Musk had done something more strategic than launching a rocket. He had shown a side of himself that was rarely seen, the capacity to listen, to learn, and perhaps to change. The trial of Elon Musk had just taken a very unexpected turn. Thank you so much for watching. What do you think happens next? Let me know your theories down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more content just like this. We'll see you in the next one. Have you ever wondered what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? What if that unstoppable force was Elon Musk, a man who builds rockets and dreams of Mars, and the immovable object was a sharp-witted lawyer named Veronica Hayes in a packed courtroom? "Mr. Musk, are you going to respond or just sit there in stunned silence?" Veronica's voice cut through the air, calm but carrying a clear challenge. Elon took a deep breath. This wasn't a press conference or a boardroom meeting. This was different. He was facing a reality he rarely had to confront directly, a reality not filtered through engineers, PR teams, or stock market tickers. For the first time in a long time, he felt the true weight of accountability. The day was a roller coaster of emotions. The tension in the room was so thick you could feel it, broken only by brief, surprising moments of connection. At one point, Elon managed to crack a joke, recalling a spectacular rocket launch failure from years ago. He described how the team, instead of despairing, had rallied together with incredible spirit to find the problem and fix it. The courtroom actually chuckled. For a fleeting moment, the immense pressure seemed to lift. The air lightened, and he was just a guy telling a story about a tough day at work. But those moments were short-lived. Veronica, ever the professional, would immediately bring the focus back with another sharp, incisive remark, and the cycle would begin all over again. The sting of public humiliation, a moment of deep reflection, a flicker of hope, and then right back to suffocating tension. It was an exhausting, relentless rhythm. By the time the court session ended for the day, Elon was drained. He had been publicly grilled, his every word scrutinized. Yet, strangely, amidst the exhaustion, he felt enlightened. He started to see that what the world might view as a public failure, a takedown of a titan, was actually something else entirely. There was a profound lesson embedded in the discomfort. He realized that true growth doesn't always feel good. Often, it comes disguised as a challenge, as something that forces you to confront your own blind spots. Humility, he thought to himself. That was the real rocket fuel he had been neglecting all this time. As he walked out of the courtroom, the scene was chaotic. Cameras flashed everywhere like a Hollywood premiere. The noise was deafening. But through the chaos, he caught Veronica's gaze. She wasn't smiling, and there was no pity in her eyes. Instead, he saw something surprising, a flicker of respect, hidden behind her professional, stoic expression. In that single silent exchange, Elon sensed that this wasn't just about a court case or a viral news clip. This was the start of something much bigger, something more transformative. Later that evening, he was back in his private office, the city lights twinkling below like a galaxy of stars. He sat in silence, just letting the day's events sink in. Every single moment replayed in his mind. Every embarrassing pause. Every laugh that was at his expense. Every pointed question from Veronica Hayes. He could feel how each one had chipped away at the armor he had built around himself for years. But something incredible was happening. Through those new cracks in his armor, a new light was starting to shine through. It wasn't the light of a new tech innovation or a groundbreaking idea for a rocket. It was the light of a new perspective. A vision not of colonizing Mars or building electric cars, but of something far more fundamental. Of understanding, of genuine humility, and of the unspoken truth that even the most powerful people in the world have something to learn. And sometimes that learning comes only when you're challenged by someone fearless enough to speak the truth, no matter who you are. This wasn't a story about winning or losing in court. It was a story about the humbling, necessary, and ultimately powerful journey of self-discovery. What do you think? Can moments of public failure truly be our greatest teachers? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more content like this. See you in the next one. The humiliation lingered, a bitter aftertaste that clung to him days after the courtroom fiasco. Elon Musk, the man who dreamed of Mars, couldn't escape the memory of Judge Veronica Hayes. Her words, sharp and unforgettable, had sliced through his public armor. The press, of course, went into a frenzy. Headlines screamed, memes multiplied like wildfire, and the stock market shuddered with uncertainty. For a man who usually seemed above it all, Elon felt a sting he hadn't experienced in years. It was vulnerability, raw and unfamiliar. He found himself pacing his private office, a high-tech sanctuary that usually sparked world-changing ideas. Today, the sleek glass and steel felt like a cage. The sprawling city lights below, once a symbol of endless possibility, now seemed to mock him. For the first time, Elon was forced to accept a hard truth. Genius doesn't make you invincible. Brilliance alone couldn't shield him from accountability. He had been served a dose of reality, unvarnished and public. But as the initial embarrassment began to fade, a new feeling took its place: suspicion. Something about the whole courtroom drama felt off. Judge Hayes's takedown was precise, yes, but it felt almost scripted. The surgical nature of her words seemed too perfectly designed for maximum impact. It was a performance, and Elon started to wonder who the director was. This nagging feeling pushed him to do what he did best: dig for data. He quietly reached out to his network, a web of trusted contacts spanning the legal world and the tech industry. He wasn't just looking for sympathy. He was hunting for anomalies, for pieces that didn't fit the official narrative. And the more he looked, the more he found. Subtle, strategic leaks to specific reporters, whispers of backroom deals and hushed conversations in circles he wasn't a part of. A pattern began to emerge from the noise. It wasn't just a judge having a bad day or a CEO having a public slip-up. This was orchestrated. The breadcrumbs led him down a rabbit hole of corporate espionage, pointing toward a rival company that stood to gain from his public downfall. He suddenly saw the bigger picture. The humiliation was just the surface, the flashy distraction. Beneath it was a complex web of envy, manipulation, and high-stakes corporate warfare. They weren't just trying to embarrass him, they were trying to dismantle everything he had built. His reputation, his companies, his entire vision for the future. It was all on the line. If he didn't move fast, the narrative they were writing for him would become his reality. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't a battle he could win with code or rockets. This was a different kind of war, fought in the shadows with whispers and innuendo. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that he couldn't fight it alone. He needed an ally. Someone who understood the legal battlefield. Someone with an inside perspective. He needed the one person he never thought he'd willingly speak to again. With a deep breath, he made the call. It was a long shot, a move born of desperation. He had his assistant contact Judge Veronica Hayes's chambers. He expected a swift rejection, perhaps even a lecture. But the response that came back was cool, professional, and entirely unexpected. She agreed to meet. Not in a courtroom, not as a judge and a defendant, but on neutral ground. She was willing to talk, to discuss the intricate machinery that had set the stage for his public humiliation. The air in the quiet cafe where they met was thick with tension. He saw her sitting at a small table in the corner, looking different without her judicial robes, more approachable, yet still radiating an aura of authority. This wasn't the fearsome judge from the bench, but a woman who understood power and how it was wielded. He sat down, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Two powerful figures on opposite sides of a spectacle, now united by a shared uncomfortable truth. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken accusations and questions. He was the one who broke it, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He laid out his suspicions, the data points, the anomalies, the whispers of a coordinated attack. He watched her face for any sign of dismissal, but she listened intently, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she didn't deny it. Instead, she confirmed his worst fears. She had felt it too, the subtle pressure, the unseen hands guiding the proceedings. The public roasting? It was a move she was cornered into, a calculated act of self-preservation in a game where she was also a pawn. In that moment, everything shifted. The judge who had humiliated him was now a potential ally, trapped in the same corporate conspiracy. She explained that powerful players, threatened by his disruptive influence, had been working behind the scenes for months. They had leveraged her position, using the legal system as their weapon. The courtroom wasn't a hall of justice. It was a stage, and they were all actors in a play written by his enemies. Elon felt a strange sense of relief mixed with a fresh wave of anger. He wasn't just being paranoid. The threat was real, and it was bigger than he could have imagined. This was a conspiracy that reached into the highest echelons of power, designed to neutralize him and seize control of the future he was trying to build. Veronica laid out the stakes. His rivals weren't just after his stock price, they were after his intellectual property, his patents, the very core of his innovations. They wanted to absorb his life's work into their own empire, leaving him as a disgraced footnote in history. The public shaming was just the first move in a long, brutal chess match. He realized then that this meeting was his one chance to turn the tables. He and Veronica, an unlikely duo forged in the fire of public spectacle, were the only ones who could expose the truth. They had to work together, combining his resources and technological prowess with her legal expertise and inside knowledge. It was a pact made in the shadows, a plan to fight back against the faceless forces trying to tear them down. They would have to be careful, moving with the precision of a surgeon and the secrecy of a spy. The journey ahead would be treacherous, filled with risks that could destroy them both. But for the first time in weeks, Elon felt a spark of his old self returning. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Determination. This was no longer about saving his reputation. It was about justice. It was about taking back control of his destiny from the puppeteers who thought they could pull his strings. The game had changed, and Elon Musk was ready to make his next move. Thank you so much for watching. This story is just getting started, and you won't want to miss what happens next. If you enjoyed this, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you get notified when we drop the next chapter. We'll see you in the next one. Veronica Hayes sat in a minimalist office, the walls lined with shelves of legal books, her expression calm but impossible to read. "Mr. Musk," she began, her voice even, "you're a visionary, yes, but your ego often blinds you. If you're here to grovel, save it. If you're here to solve the problem, and then let's talk." Elon swallowed, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He knew she was right. The public humiliation had been a brutal, but necessary, crack in his armor, opening a door to a self-awareness he hadn't known he lacked. But now came the real challenge. Understanding the hidden forces at play and navigating them without letting pride steer him back into the storm. Over the next several weeks, Elon and Veronica formed an uneasy partnership. Their days were a volatile mix of tense debates, sharp-edged sarcasm, and rare, fleeting moments of mutual respect. Veronica's razor-sharp wit and exacting standards challenged him at every turn. She forced him to re-examine decisions he had long taken for granted, picking apart his logic with surgical precision. He wasn't just a CEO in her office, he was a student, learning a new language of humility and strategy. In Veronica's office, which felt more like a war room with each passing day, Elon pored over a mountain of documents. They sifted through corporate filings, internal communications, and confidential reports. Slowly, a dark picture began to emerge. The rival company's involvement became undeniable. It was a masterclass in corporate espionage. They had strategically leaked misinformation, manipulated court filings with subtle but damning alterations, and even planted fabricated stories with complicit journalists to paint Elon as reckless and unstable. This wasn't just a public roast that got out of hand. It was a calculated, systematic attempt to destabilize him, his companies, and everything he was building. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. Elon had faced countless challenges in the tech world. He'd seen rockets explode on the launch pad, endured crippling production delays, and weathered waves of public skepticism. But this was different. This was a personal, orchestrated attack designed not just to compete with him, but to utterly undermine and destroy him. For a moment, a chilling despair threatened to overwhelm him. The scale of the betrayal, the sheer malice behind it, was staggering. Was this a fight he could even win? He looked across the desk at Veronica, who was calmly highlighting a line in a legal document, her focus unbroken. Seeing her resolve, a glimmer of hope sparked within him. He wasn't alone in this. With Veronica's legal insight and his own relentless ingenuity, they began to map out a counteroffensive. This wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. This was about exposing a deep-seated conspiracy that threatened the very integrity of their industry. Their plan was audacious, a multi-front campaign that would require them to navigate treacherous legal hurdles, withstand intense media scrutiny, and anticipate further corporate sabotage. As they worked, a profound realization dawned on Elon. Veronica's initial brutal roast wasn't simply an act of public ridicule. It was a test, a crucible. She had pushed him to his breaking point to see if he would shatter or be forged into something stronger. She had forced him to confront not only his public image, but, more importantly, his own internal flaws. The pride and ego that made him a force of nature were also his greatest vulnerabilities. The battle ahead was daunting, a high-stakes game of chess against a shadowy and ruthless opponent. But for the first time in a long time, Elon felt a sense of clarity. The path wasn't about revenge, it was about restoration. He and Veronica, the unlikeliest of allies, prepared to step onto the battlefield. They would need to be smarter, faster, and more resilient than ever before. Their strategy relied on a delicate balance, leveraging the truth while navigating a world of lies. Elon started to see the world through Veronica's eyes, a complex web of motives, leverage points, and hidden agendas. He learned to anticipate moves, to read between the lines of legal jargon, and to use the media not as a megaphone for his ego, but as a strategic tool. Each document they uncovered was a piece of the puzzle, and with every piece, the enemy's face became clearer, their methods more despicable. The long nights spent in her office, fueled by coffee and a shared sense of purpose, transformed their relationship. The tension eased, replaced by a grudging, then genuine, respect. He admired her intellect and her unwavering moral compass. She, in turn, began to see past the caricature of the brash billionaire to the man underneath. Flawed, yes, but also brilliant and fiercely determined to build a better future. They discovered that the rival company had exploited a network of disgruntled former employees, paying them for confidential information and false testimonies. It was a web of deceit that extended further than they could have imagined, implicating figures they had once considered colleagues, even friends. The personal nature of this betrayal cut deeper than any business loss. As their investigation deepened, the risk grew. They received veiled threats. Their systems were targeted by hackers. A sense of paranoia began to creep in, but it only strengthened their resolve. They were no longer just a client and a lawyer. They were partners in a fight for the truth. Veronica taught Elon the art of quiet strength, of moving with deliberation and precision, while Elon's relentless drive pushed them forward when exhaustion set in. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source, an anonymous tip from someone inside the rival company, a person whose conscience finally outweighed their fear. It was the smoking gun they needed, an internal memo detailing the entire conspiracy from its inception. Holding it, Elon felt not a surge of triumph, but a quiet, somber sense of validation. Now, they were ready. Their plan was no longer just a defense, it was a righteous counterattack. They would present their findings not in a fit of rage, but with the cold, hard force of undeniable fact. The world had watched him get roasted, had seen him humbled. Now they would watch him rise, not with the same old arrogance, but with a newfound wisdom and a powerful ally by his side. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of the corporate world. Elon looked at Veronica, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The roast had been his public trial by fire, but what came next would be his redemption. He had been broken down, but in the process he had been rebuilt into something stronger, something smarter, something more human. And for that, he was strangely grateful. The real work was about to begin. Thank you so much for watching this story unfold. If you enjoyed this narrative, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. We love hearing from you, so drop a comment below with your thoughts. Until next time, stay curious. Picture this: Elon and Veronica, plunged deep into a corporate conspiracy. The scene is set with late nights in cold, sterile offices, surrounded by mountains of confidential files. Imagine the air crackling with tension during hushed, heated phone calls. It felt less like a business dispute and more like a scene straight out of a high-stakes thriller. Every single step Elon took, he hit a wall. Witnesses who suddenly couldn't remember anything, legal roadblocks appearing out of thin air, and those dark moments where it felt like the conspiracy was an unstoppable giant, too powerful to even challenge. The pressure was immense, a constant weight on his shoulders. But even in the thick of this corporate warfare, there were unexpected glimmers of light. Veronica, who always seemed so stern and professional, started to show a different side. A quick, almost imperceptible smile after a small victory. A moment of patience as she explained a complex legal strategy for the third time. And on rare occasions, a quiet acknowledgement of Elon's relentless drive and his sharp intellect. These small gestures were like cracks of dawn in a long, dark night, and something was changing in Elon too. The famous arrogance began to soften, replaced by something new. He was learning to listen, to trust someone else's expertise, to truly collaborate. It was a transformation he'd never anticipated, forced upon him by the very crisis that threatened to destroy him. This wasn't just about saving his company. It was about rediscovering himself. Then came the breakthrough, the moment that changed everything. Buried deep in a server, Elon unearthed the smoking gun, a recorded conversation. The voices on the recording laid the rival company's entire scheme bare. It was damning, undeniable proof of their plot. You could almost feel the collective gasp in the room. They had them, but the relief was short-lived. Having the proof was one thing, using it was another. The danger hadn't vanished. The public humiliation he had endured wasn't magically erased. The recording was a powerful weapon, but the war was far from over. This was just the first major battle. Yet with that recording in hand, a new feeling emerged. Hope. It was a powerful surge, a realization for Elon that he could actually win this. Not by being the loudest voice in the room, not through brute force or ego, but through something more refined, strategy, intelligence, and a clear moral compass. He wasn't just fighting for his company anymore, he was fighting for the truth. He and Veronica huddled together, meticulously plotting their next move. It was like a chess match, thinking 10 steps ahead. They weren't just planning an attack, they were preparing for a public confrontation, a final act that would drag the entire conspiracy into the light for the world to see. Every detail was scrutinized, every potential outcome debated. The plan had to be flawless. But just as they felt the tide turning, just when Elon believed he had finally gained the upper hand, the board flipped. The rival company, cunning and ruthless, had been playing their own game. They had anticipated his discovery, and they had laid a trap. A brilliant, devious trap designed not just to stop him, but to use his own plan against him, potentially jeopardizing everything he had fought so hard to protect. The tension, which had briefly subsided, skyrocketed to an unbearable level. He was right back on the edge, staring into the abyss. One wrong move could lead to catastrophic failure, but on the other side of that abyss was redemption. It was a gamble for everything. The stakes had never been higher. Imagine the final scene. Elon, alone in his office late at night. The only light comes from his monitor, casting long shadows on the wall. He's reviewing the plan, the one he and Veronica had crafted with such care, now knowing there's a hidden danger within it. You can see the sweat on his forehead, his hands hovering over the desk, trembling slightly. The air is thick with anticipation. He knows the next phase, the final confrontation, will demand everything he has. Not just his intelligence or his resources, but a level of courage and, surprisingly, humility he was only just beginning to understand. And in that quiet, lonely moment, his mind drifts back to Veronica's initial, brutal honesty, that roast that had stung so deeply. He finally understood. Sometimes the most painful challenges, the critiques that cut the deepest, are the ones that force us to see ourselves clearly. They are the crucibles that forge real growth. He realized that enlightenment often comes from the most unexpected places and from the people we least expect to teach us anything. The fight wasn't just external anymore, it was deeply internal, a battle for his own evolution, and it was a battle he was now ready to win. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more deep dives like this, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We've got a lot more coming your way. See you in the next one. Elon gazed out at the city lights, a mixture of determination and apprehension swirling in his eyes. He knew the path ahead was a minefield, littered with danger, deception, and enough tension to snap a steel cable. But alongside the risks, he saw a glimmer of possibility. He'd already learned so much on this journey, enduring public humiliation, digging up buried truths, and accepting guidance from the most unexpected places. As the night deepened around him, one thing became crystal clear. This was far from over. The final, shocking revelation, the one that would leave everyone breathless, was still waiting in the wings. The next morning, sunlight spilled across Elon Musk's office, glinting off the sleek, modern surfaces. But the brightness did nothing to cut through the thick tension in the air. This was it. Today was the day. After weeks of relentless investigation, countless sleepless nights, and a tense collaboration with Judge Veronica Hayes, the scattered pieces of the conspiracy had finally clicked into place. Elon's heart hammered in his chest, not with the fear of failure, but with the raw anticipation of a showdown that would decide everything. The rival company, a shadowy competitor hell-bent on destabilizing his entire empire, had made a critical miscalculation. They had grossly underestimated one thing, his sheer resilience. And they had completely overlooked the other, Veronica Hayes. Their partnership, which began as a reluctant truce, had forged itself into a formidable alliance. They pushed each other to think faster, dig deeper, and act smarter. They were a two-person army, ready for war. The confrontation was scheduled for a neutral corporate conference room. Cameras were banned, but the tension was so palpable you could practically taste it. Elon arrived first, his long strides eating up the carpet as he paced, his mind a whirlwind of scenarios and countermoves. When Veronica entered, the large room seemed to shrink. Her presence was commanding, yet anchored by an unshakable calm, a subtle reminder of the courtroom where this whole saga had begun. She met his gaze, her own steady and sharp. "Ready?" she asked, her voice precise, carrying a faint, familiar hint of a challenge. Elon stopped pacing and took a deep breath, a slow smile touching his lips. "Born ready," he replied, the words laced with a confidence he hadn't felt in weeks. He gestured towards the long, polished table. They won't know what hit them. Their opponents arrived exactly on time, a delegation of 3 executives from the rival firm, their faces set like stone. Their lead counsel, a man named Arthur Vance, exuded an air of smug superiority, as if this meeting were a mere formality before his inevitable victory. They took their seats opposite Elon and Veronica, the table feeling more like a battle line than a piece of furniture. Vance began, his voice smooth and condescending. "Mr. Musk, Judge Hayes, we appreciate you agreeing to this our discussion. Let's be frank. Your accusations are baseless, and frankly, quite damaging. We're here to offer you a chance to retract them quietly, before this escalates into a public spectacle that will benefit no one." Veronica leaned forward slightly, her gaze locking onto Vance. "Mr. Vance, we're not here to retract anything. We're here to present you with the consequences of your actions." Her tone was ice. She slid a thin data drive across the table. It stopped perfectly in front of Vance. "On that drive, you'll find everything. The manipulated source code for your last product launch, the offshore accounts used to pay off key engineers, the internal communications detailing your plan to sabotage our supply chain. We have it all." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Vance's face, but he quickly masked it with a dismissive laugh. "A bluff. You have nothing but conjecture." Elon leaned back in his chair, his expression almost casual. "Is it a bluff, Arthur? Is the sworn testimony from your former head of R&D a bluff? Or the server logs we recovered from the accidental fire at your data center 2 months ago, the one you thought had wiped everything clean? We found it interesting that the fire suppression system was manually disabled 10 minutes before the alarm was triggered. Our expert witness finds it interesting too." The color drained from the faces of the other 2 executives. They exchanged nervous glances. Vance's smug facade began to crack, the sweat beading on his forehead a stark contrast to his cool demeanor just moments before. He had walked in expecting to intimidate, to control the narrative. Now, he was trapped. This is corporate espionage," Vance stammered, his voice losing its polished edge. Veronica's response was swift and sharp. "No, Mr. Vance. This is justice. You built your company on lies and sabotage. You tried to ruin a competitor not through innovation, but through deception. And you did it with a staggering degree of arrogance, believing you were untouchable. She paused, letting the weight of her words fill the silence. That ends today. Elon picked up where she left off, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight of authority. Here are your options. Option 1. You can fight this in court. The evidence will be made public. Your company will be dissected by regulators, your stock will plummet, and you personally will face multiple felony charges. Your careers will be over, and your reputations will be permanently destroyed. He let that sink in before continuing. Or, there's option 2. You issue a full public apology and a retraction of all false claims made against us. You divest completely from the division responsible for this conspiracy, and your entire board, including the 3 of you, will resign, effective immediately. In return, we agree to a civil settlement, and the criminal evidence remains sealed pending your full cooperation. The room was silent, the air thick with the unspoken terror of the rival executives. They were caught, completely and utterly outmaneuvered. Vance looked at his colleagues, his eyes wide with a mix of fury and desperation. He had underestimated Elon Musk's tenacity, but more than that, he had underestimated the brilliant, strategic mind of Veronica Hayes. They were a perfect team, one providing the relentless drive, the other providing the lethal legal precision. After a long, agonizing moment, one of the other executives finally broke the silence, his voice barely a whisper. We'll take option 2. As they left the room, defeated and broken, Elon turned to Veronica. A sense of profound relief washed over him, but it was mixed with something else, a deep, newfound respect. We did it, he said, the 2 words carrying the weight of their entire ordeal. Veronica offered a rare, genuine smile. Yes, we did. But her expression quickly turned serious again. Elon, this was just one battle. The person who greenlit this operation, the true mastermind. They weren't in that room. Vance and his team were just pawns. Elon's eyes narrowed. He knew she was right. They had cut off one head of the Hydra, but the beast was still alive. This victory was just a stepping stone. So, the journey isn't over, he stated, a renewed sense of purpose hardening his resolve. Not by a long shot, Veronica confirmed, her gaze meeting his. The ultimate revelation is still out there, and now they know we're coming for them. The fight was won, but the war had just begun. The real enemy was still in the shadows, waiting, and Elon and Veronica were ready to drag them into the light. Thank you so much for watching. This story is just getting started, and you won't want to miss what happens next. If you enjoyed this, please hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you're the first to know when the next chapter drops. We'll see you in the next video. Elon tried to calm his racing heart. As ready as I'll ever be, he murmured. Just then, the rival executives strolled in, their faces plastered with smug, self-satisfied grins. They were like sharks circling, completely oblivious to the fact that they were swimming directly into a meticulously prepared trap. The air in the conference room was thick with tension, a silence that felt heavier than any sound. Elon stood, his posture straight, his gaze unwavering. He began his presentation, not with charts and projections, but with evidence. First, the emails appeared on the massive screen behind him. Each one was a link in a chain of deceit, their own words betraying their scheme. You could feel the atmosphere begin to shift. The smugness on their faces started to flicker, replaced by a dawning uneasement. Next, he brought up the leaked memos. These were internal documents, never meant to see the light of day, detailing their plans to sabotage his company from the inside. The room grew colder. One executive shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Another started tapping his pen nervously on the table. Their confident facade was cracking, revealing the panic underneath. Elon let each piece of evidence hang in the air, allowing the weight of it to sink in. Then came the final blow, the recorded conversations. Elon played the audio and their own voices filled the room, plotting, conspiring, and laughing about his potential downfall. The sound was crystal clear, undeniable. This was the moment the dam broke. Shock rippled across their faces, pure, unadulterated disbelief. Arrogance evaporated, replaced by a pale, sickly fear. Some of them started to stammer, trying to form denials that died on their lips. Others just sat there, ashen-faced, staring at the screen as if it were a ghost. Watching them crumble, Elon felt a strange cocktail of emotions. There was the sweet taste of vindication, yes, but also a profound sense of relief. It was like a weight he didn't even realize he was carrying had been lifted from his shoulders. But this wasn't the end. The real masterstroke was yet to come. The final game-changing twist was about to be revealed. Just as the chaos reached its peak, a new voice cut through the noise, sharp and clear as glass. It was Veronica. She stepped forward from the side of the room, her presence commanding immediate silence. "What you attempted," she began, her eyes sweeping over each of the stunned executives, "was not just unethical, it was illegal." She paused, letting the gravity of her words settle. "And now," she continued, her voice devoid of any sympathy, "the consequences are yours to bear." In that exact moment, as the legal implications dawned on them, something clicked for Elon. It was a profound realization. All the stress, the public humiliation he had endured, the relentless media frenzy, it all suddenly made sense. The courtroom roast, the snide remarks from critics, every single jab and pointed accusation. It hadn't been just about tearing him down. It had all been a crucible, a trial by fire. Every challenge had forced him to look deeper, to reevaluate his strategies, and to dig for a strength he didn't know he possessed. It was a test, not just of his business skills, but of his very character. It tested his humility, his resilience, and his ability to stay standing when the world wanted him to fall. He had been forged in that fire, and he had emerged stronger, more focused, and more determined than ever before. As the news of the scandal broke, the rival company began to implode. The stock plummeted, investigations were launched, and the executives who had walked in so confidently were now facing a firestorm of their own making. Watching the fallout, Elon felt a wave of clarity wash over him. So pure and so powerful it took his breath away. He finally understood. True success wasn't just about building the next big thing or accumulating wealth. It wasn't about the numbers on a spreadsheet or the headlines in the news. Real success, he realized, was built on a foundation of integrity. It was about taking accountability for your actions and having the courage to confront uncomfortable truths, both in others and in yourself. It was about knowing that how you win matters just as much as winning itself. This entire ordeal, as painful as it was, had given him a gift far more valuable than any business deal. A new perspective, a renewed sense of purpose. After the dust settled and the authorities were escorting the disgraced executives out of the building, Elon and Veronica walked out of the conference room together. The hallway was quiet, a stark contrast to the emotional battlefield they had just left. For the first time, they looked at each other and shared a quiet, knowing smile. It wasn't a smile of triumph, but one of mutual respect and shared endurance. For a fleeting moment, Veronica's usually stern, all-business exterior softened. In that small, almost imperceptible change, Elon saw the ally who had stood by him, who had pushed him and challenged him, but who had never wavered in her belief that the truth would prevail. And in that moment, he felt a surge of gratitude that was completely unexpected, a deep appreciation for the difficult journey they had navigated together. They had faced the storm and come out the other side, not just as victors, but as wiser, stronger individuals, ready for whatever came next. Thanks so much for watching this story unfold with me. If you enjoyed this journey of strategy and redemption, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. Your support means the world. See you in the next video. Weeks later, when the story finally broke, the world saw everything differently. Elon's reputation wasn't just restored, it was completely transformed. He was no longer the eccentric billionaire who got pranked. Instead, he was seen as a man who had faced public ridicule head-on, uncovered a hidden conspiracy, and emerged from the fire not just intact, but wiser, stronger, and more grounded than ever before. Social media, which had once been a torrent of mockery, was now buzzing with a different kind of energy. Admiration. Memes were replaced with quotes. Jokes were replaced with discussions about resilience. People weren't laughing at him anymore. They were looking up to him. One evening, Elon found himself standing atop a Tesla testing facility, just as the sun began to set. The sky was painted in fiery shades of orange and red, a perfect mirror of the spark that was reignited in his mind. Below him, engineers were testing new prototypes, their focused energy a testament to the relentless pursuit of progress. He watched the sleek vehicles glide across the track, silent and powerful, and realized that this whole ordeal, the failure, the humiliation, the unexpected detour into a world of corporate espionage, wasn't an endpoint. It was a catalyst. It was the resistance needed to create a stronger current, the pressure required to forge something new. His thoughts drifted to Veronica Hayes, the judge whose sharp, incisive words had initially felt like a public flogging. He remembered the sting of her critique, the way it had cut through his ego and laid bare his vulnerabilities. But now, in the quiet glow of the sunset, he understood. She hadn't been trying to tear him down. She had been holding up a mirror, forcing him to see the blind spots he had ignored for far too long. She had taught him an invaluable lesson, one that no business school or engineering textbook ever could. Sometimes, the harshest critique, the one that challenges your very foundation, is the one that awakens you to your fullest potential. It's the wake-up call you never knew you needed. And in that moment of clarity, Elon grasped the ultimate truth of his bizarre journey. Life can roast you when you least expect it. It can put you on a stage under the brightest, most unflattering lights and expose every flaw. But the very people who turn up the heat, the ones who challenge you the most, can also be the ones who inadvertently show you the way forward. They are the friction that polishes the stone. This story doesn't end with a spectacular rocket launch or a screaming headline. It doesn't culminate in a grand public victory lap. Instead, it closes with this quiet moment of reflection. It's the story of Elon Musk, once humbled by a comedian's roast, now standing empowered. But his power wasn't just derived from his visionary ideas or his vast resources anymore. It was rooted in a profound, newfound understanding that true growth, the kind that lasts, comes from confronting both the challenges thrown at you by the world and the limitations you build within yourself. As the city lights began to flicker on below, dotting the landscape like a galaxy of human ambition, the night air buzzed with a sense of infinite possibility. A genuine smile spread across Elon's face. He knew the journey had been fraught with tension, embarrassment, and even real danger. But it had also been illuminating. It had lit up the path to resilience, to humility, and to a kind of triumph he had never anticipated. The roast was over. The cameras were off. The laughter had faded, and the conspiracy had been untangled. But as the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, one thing was crystal clear. The lessons from that wild, unexpected, and ultimately transformative experience would last a lifetime. They were now part of his code, part of the blueprint for whatever came next. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible story. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss another video. We love exploring the hidden stories behind the headlines, and we're so glad to have you with us. Until next time, stay curious,